Pini, in 2010, when China entirely cut Japan off from rare earth exports as part of a dispute in the South China Sea, the US and Japan took its case to the World Trade Organization, and China was forced to resume exports to Japan. As the Trump administration hands over to the incoming Biden government in the US, how will this play out in the US-China conflict, and in particular the rare earth space?
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between now and 2010, when the US and the US and Japan and others successfully contested at the WTO China's withholding of rare earth exports, and China then 40 days later resumed exporting rare earths. The big difference is that at the time it was seen by the WTO as a nefarious action, given that China had a surplus of these materials. Well, the same thing to happen today, in other words, not that China is cutting off rare earth exports as part of any trade war or dispute, but simply because it's prioritizing these materials for domestic production, which it is at the present time, and as I mentioned earlier, has become a net importer of these materials. There really is no case to take to the WTO. China is well within their rights to utilize these materials for its own domestic production. That's what they are. With their Belt and Road Initiative and with their Made in China 2025, they want to maintain the supremacy as the global leader of manufacturing. But that leaves all of us in the rest of the world in a vulnerable position that we cannot source these materials. So I think the discussion here is less about sort of the incoming Biden administration and dialogue with China, because this is really not China's problem. This is our problem. And I think the focus has to be, well, it's always good to have good relationships between countries. So I'll leave that to the Biden administration and the Chinese government. But in terms of being able to have these materials, that is something that the Biden administration can get very much behind in terms of pushing for a domestic rare earth sector, which includes the mines, which includes the processing, the metals and alloys, and the final magnet product. And from what we're hearing, the Biden administration, with its $2 trillion spend on EVs and renewables, is going to sort of keep in place the executive orders by President Trump with regards to these materials being sourced within the US, and with the various government agencies getting involved. But I think, coordination is required between the agencies themselves, as you have, the Pentagon obviously dealing with defense applications, but you've got the Department of Energy dealing with EVs and renewables. So I think it's really an interagency effort that's going to be required here, speared by the Biden administration.
Thank you, Pini. To find out more, please check out asiatimesfinancial.com.